Entry 25, Monday, May 4th, 1964. This is a page long, and Mr. Stern is going over to the FBI to take a look at some files. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as was the case with the CIA, Sam wanted to explore the FBI's files with respect to Oswald, and then make certain that he had seen everything, and then could discuss with the Bureau which of them could be made part of the record of the Commission's investigation. So he was given access to the files, and subsequently was told that he had seen all the available files, and the Bureau was generally ready to permit most of them to be included in the Commission's files, with a few exceptions. It was learned during the House Select Committee's investigation that, in fact, the Bureau had withheld from Stern items that had been in the files, but were deleted before the files were shown to him. And there were at least 3 specific deletions, and one of which I remember related to the interview of Oswald in New Orleans by an FBI agent. And apparently on that occasion, Oswald had declined to participate in a polygraph examination. So I deduced from this that the three file items that were left out would have been useful in judging whether the Bureau had sufficient information to justify referring Oswald's name to the Secret Service, and certainly a reluctance to engage in a polygraph examination was something that might have triggered interest in the agency, and escalated the importance of this particular individual. So that was a disappointment. Of course, we did learn for many years, and we were generally under the impression that we were receiving meaningful cooperation from the FBI.
In the research community, the fact that the FBI was withholding information has suggested to some that they were in some way complicit in the assassination to kill President Kennedy. But there's a distinction there between trying to make the agency look as good as possible and try to minimize any evidence that they were incorrect or did something wrong prior to the assassination, and actually taking active part in a plot to murder the president.
Yes, of course. I cannot understand why anyone would conclude that their failures in this regard were anything other than the desire to protect the reputation of Mr. Hoover and the Bureau.
We were talking a couple entries back about Hosty and all the mistakes, some of which didn't come to light until a decade later. And yet, when Hoover testified later on, he basically said that all his agents had done their duty to the best of their ability and no one had really done anything wrong. No,
that's right. Hoover did testify. I forget at what stage in the investigation, but he was absolutely firm in his representations that everything that the Bureau knew about Oswald had been communicated to the Commission, and that without any doubt whatsoever, there was not sufficient evidence of Oswald's character or record that justified referring his name to the Secret Service. What Hoover did not disclose, and what did not become known for about a decade, was the fact that Hoover, had directed an internal investigation of his agency's performance in December of 1963, within a month of the assassination, and he received a report promptly from an assistant director, and Hoover concluded that without a doubt the agency had performed poorly in its investigation of Oswald, and that without a doubt Oswald's name should have been referred to the Secret Service. And as a result of this report, he disciplined 17 agents and officials of the FBI for their failure to conduct a thorough and acceptable examination of Oswald before the assassination. So because of Hoover's posture, he could misrepresent the facts, that is, lie to the Commission without any apparent risk of disclosure or leak from within the agency, at least no such leak within his lifetime. And he died in 1972, as I recall, and it was subsequent that some of these disclosures about the FBI's failures came to light and were the subject of congressional investigation. Hoover had the self-confidence with respect to the secrecy within the agency that he went public immediately after the release of the Commission's report to complain about its treatment of the FBI. Now, in fact, the Commission's treatment of the FBI was very gentle. They agreed that the criteria were so vague that perhaps the FBI did not have an obligation to submit Oswald's name to the Secret Service in advance of the motorcade. But at the same time, the Commission felt there was sufficient evidence in possession of the FBI that they should have exercised more care and informed the Secret Service, notwithstanding the limitations of the pertinent criteria. And the director went public and said that was a Monday morning quarterbacking, which was obviously intended to reject the Commission's conclusions as totally unwarranted and inappropriate. So the sheer gall of the man under these circumstances confirms everything one has read about him in the past, and the truth did not come to light until sometime in the mid-1970s.
In the first paragraph, just a brief mention, but Mr. Buchanan returns. You say you spoke with Katzenbach, I believe, about him possibly appearing before the Commission?
Yes, I'm surprised to see that myself. I don't recall whether there was any interest on the part of the Commission or Rankin to bring Buchanan before the Commission, but someone must have raised the possibility, and I didn't think it was appropriate, and it turned out that Katzenbach didn't really have one view or another about it, left it up to the Commission to decide. I also reported to him on some of the questions open with respect to Ruby, because the question of interrogating Ruby after his conviction and while his appeal was pending was a sensitive matter that was of a concern within the Commission, and also of concern to Ruby's lawyers. So I think I mentioned that in passing, just to keep the Deputy Attorney General at least apprised in general terms of some of the things we were worrying about.
It's just worth noting for clarification that, Mark Lane testified twice before the Commission, but obviously you can't have every critic who's ever, written anything conspiratorial about the assassination come and testify. But was there, give me the distinction between why Lane testified versus Buchanan.
That's a very clear distinction. Mark Lane said he had documents and information that was pertinent to the Commission's investigation. And he was called twice to produce those documents, and eventually it was proved that he lied to the Commission when he said he had not recorded a conversation he had with a witness called Helen Markham. Miss Markham was one of the witnesses to the Tippit killing by Oswald. And according to Lane, Miss Markham, was a witness and described the shooter as a short, stocky person with bushy hair, and which was not an accurate description of Oswald. So Lane took this evidence and maintained that Oswald did not shoot Patrolman Tippit. So he denied recording his conversation, but in fact he had recorded it, and he made available a copy of this under terms that he would not be prosecuted for illegal recording a telephone conversation. And when the FBI produced a transcript of the telephone conversation, it became clear, as David Bellin commented, that Lane was trying to force and encourage Miss Markham into supporting her view of a short, stocky, bushy-haired person, and Helen Markham did not do that, even without his enticing encouragement to support such a description. So it demonstrated that Lane really had been not truthful to the commission, either with respect to having documents or the nature of those documents. Now, Buchanan, as I mentioned earlier, really had no evidentiary materials to prevent. He simply had a set of contentions and theories that were well known to the commission and didn't have to be elaborated by anyone, since we already were aware of them and were busy addressing those in the course of our report.